Hi, I'm Reggie Turner. I'm here with Jim Miller and Terrence Moore. The Flip Side starts right now. Welcome to the show. Tonight, gentlemen, let's start on some topics around the state, but let's talk a little bit about Governor Hogan and the prospects that he may have a White House running him. But before we do so, gentlemen.
Oh gosh, that's a calculator.
Oh Lord, here we go.
Terrence, last time you had me carry the one. I know everyone's been waiting for this update in regards to Trone versus Parrott. The race is tightened again. Economy's on the slide. Last week I had Trone up by 10. Trone up by 2.
Wow.
Within the margin of error. That's where we are.
Listen, if you didn't see the paper recently, President Biden is coming to Hagerstown.
Yes.
We
don't know where.
Yeah, some secret
Officially.
location, but that's bringing in the big guns. That's we've seen the ads, we've seen the money thrown. Now, if you got to reach, that means the seat is extremely important as well.
But let me ask you this: Does Biden?
I don't think Biden helps in Western Maryland.
No, I don't think he does either. In fact, I just think, what are the chances, with all due respect to our president, what are the chances he won't have some kind of gaffe that's going to be all over Hagerstown Facebook?
I agree with you. I think he's calling in the big guns, but there's a margin of error in that as well. That can easily backfire.
Oh, it can absolutely back. In fact, I might raise Parrott's percentages because Joe Biden is coming to town.
Yeah.
Because he may confirm for some what they were wondering about in terms of his fitness to be a president.
Yeah, this is really pushing the party. Not really no agenda, no actions you're going to take. You're just kind of bringing in someone you know, someone you're close to, tying it to the party, and you're further dividing the party line. I don't know if this was a home run.
Well, we'll see after the fact, but
we'll see after the facts. But let me just paint this before we get to what we really came to talk about tonight. So Nate Silver, I talked about his polls and things of that nature.
Right.
He has Trone slightly favored. Okay. Right. However, the one credible poll in the state of Maryland that is out there has Parrott up by 2 points.
So you're following the pollster.
I follow the pollster, I read the tea leaves, and I talk to my friends on my Google machine.
Okay. All right. Fat rat runs late. I'm all in for Trone at this point.
I'm still thinking Trone's going to pull it out. I am impressed by Parrott's silence, though. That's impressive. There has been no swinging back. There's no big campaigning, in retaliation to some of the commercials. He's been quietly running in this campaign.
Well, he has. Is he running hard enough? Is he running, is he making this? Because at this point in this district, this has got to be almost retail politics. You've got to be at the nursing homes and the Elks clubs and the whatever else, whoever will let you in the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's party line politics.
All right.
Why waste the money?
Well, we'll see. I'm on the record. 2 points, margin of error. That's where we are, gentlemen.
Subject to change within the 30 or 60 minutes that we're going to have this show.
Listen, if something comes up on my Google machine that there's a change, I'm letting the people know that there's a change.
Okay.
All right, but here's our first topic, gentlemen. Governor Hogan convened with some supporters recently and is looking at a possible White House run. Jim, what say you?
Well, who at this table predicted that more than once?
I think we've been talking about that for about 2 years now.
Yeah, and right? I'm going to take credit on this particular show. Even before the two of you joined us, I think I was talking about Hogan for president. I share the worries of many that are Hogan supporters, and that is the fact that he is a quote-unquote rhino, and will not get the hard right vote, and that he's going to have problem making it through a primary in many states, not the least of which is Maryland. That said, he's got a lot going on.
Let me pull something out of this poll, and I'll throw it to you. You know, one of the things that addresses that in this article is that the first primary, okay, for the presidential election, for that primary season, is New Hampshire, which is more of an independent-minded state where Republicans and Democrats can both participate. So they you know, his team thinks that might be a fertile ground for him to start and to build momentum. Terrence, what say you?
The next headline, water's wet, right? We knew this was going to happen. This is strategically played out. He's capitalizing on his work during COVID, but didn't come out of the COVID crisis saying, now I'm running for president, because then it would have been looking too opportunist.
Well, he just wrote his book coming out of
Right,
COVID.
and he took a step back, and people asked the question. He said he wasn't. Then people thought maybe he'd be running for a congressional seat later on.
Senate.
Yeah, Senate as well. And so he kind of took that step back so he can now tout those successes without grandstanding, because a lot of others, Republicans who will be running in 2024, have already hit the ground running. So he gets to let them take all the bullets, deal with all the issues, and then come up from the rear, bring his resume, bring the work that he did during COVID, both here nationally and internationally, and gain some ground. I think it's well played.
I'm going to go back to another topic that I have been on throughout the course of this show, or at least in recent years, and that is the notion of open primaries. If we had open primaries, he would be a force.
Yes.
Yep.
But you know, I think this midterm election will have some stake in this too. So for instance, if a lot of the far right candidates get shellacked and the Republicans don't take the percentage of the House, even though they're projected to win it, right, easily. But if they don't take the percentage of majority that is expected, and the Democrats retain the Democrats, then there may be a change over the next 2 years of, hey, we got to get back to a winning strategy, and things may move a little bit from the far right back to center right.
Everything's
That
about
hasn't
timing.
happened before, but okay.
Everything's about timing. We've seen the gasp that former President Trump made recently as well. So with the statements that he's made, that has offered up some threats to legislators as well. I think you kind of come on the heels of this, and he's still doing it slowly. He's bringing supporters together. He's talking to donors, talking about his time. He didn't come out and say, I'm going to run. He's still slow playing it in, so he doesn't have to deal.
That's right.
He's gaining support now, right?
Right.
Well, and the thing that this article speaks to is this was his playbook to run for governor, right? He started a PAC called Change Maryland. You know, a big player in that is Chris Chafee that we have a relationship with. So he is following the same playbook of assessing, you know, his likelihood, his odds, his donor base in regards to doing that. You know, the other interesting thing that I found in this article was at this event he held, one of the folks that spoke was Thomas Kelso, and I'm tying this back local. Thomas Kelso, long-term campaign chair, who Hogan had appointed to the Maryland Stadium Authority, right? So now we can see the names and the players that were involved in getting the Stadium Authority to fund the project here.
Yep.
In Hagerstown.
And even like you talk about how he became governor, he still never took credit for wanting to be governor. He was always talked into being governor, right? Friends of him asked him to run, and it never looked like it was about him looking for an opportunity. And he's doing the same thing here. He's building up people saying, you know what, you need to run, we need you. So it's a perfect political move.
Yeah, and the rest of his term, he's going to be making his victory trips around the state. He's been on the Eastern Shore in a lot of places making his tour. I believe he is planning to be here later in the month. I believe there's looking to be some coordination between that and the ribbon cutting for the proposed medical school and those type of things. So he'll make his way out to Western Maryland. So it'll be interesting to see. At this point though, odds that he's going to make a run.
I think, okay, I'm going to say 100%.
Okay, Mr. Moore.
I'm going to say 90%. I'll say 90%. A lot can happen in the next few years.
Here's the problem, though. Here is truly the problem. And I'm going to go back to this, and I said this already. It's about the fact that in a primary, only the extremes usually show up. It's odd for somebody like me that is a centrist, I think, to show up and vote for that. And that's going to be a problem for him. Because to me, you know, if his was a dating profile, to me, he would be the nice guy. To the far right, he is the registered sex offender, right? That's a problem.
But that's why slow playing it works.
Exactly.
It's vulture politics, right? Let them destroy each other and come pick up the bones.
As
You
long,
know?
but you've got to be careful about timing about that, because some of the candidates tried that in the last presidential election, specifically on the Republican side, and they jumped in too late.
Right.
Right.
And right now on a general ballot, you know, Trump would beat him. You know, that was one of the things that I saw in some of the publication that I read recently. But it's just kind of, as you say, slowly working his way up, building the relationships, still raising money, leaving his options open.
And the biggest thing for him is being a rhino. That tagline that's been attached to him is going to help him. We're seeing independent voters and
It's going to
unaffiliated
help
voters.
him more in the general, though.
Yeah, he has to get through some of the rough stages of the primary.
Right.
But as this article was stating, New Hampshire sets up as a state that, you know, he wins the first primary.
Right. But here's the other thing. If he makes it through the general, here's what I think is going to be, here's what I think should be one of his taglines when they say, you hated this, you hate this. And they say, well, yeah, but Maryland did a law about this and I let it go to law. I didn't sign it because you're right, I don't like it. But that common sense thing, boy, I wish that was more appealing to people.
Right. He made few enemies by playing it neutral a lot. You know what? I'm not going to fight it, but I'm not for it.
He didn't jump in and say I'm a MAGA guy. He didn't jump in immediately and say I'm an anti-Trump. When Trump made it clear that he was going to do things stupid, then Governor Hogan jumped in and made comments about that. But you know, we've got to get past this point where we have the choices on the general election are the lesser of who cares.
Well,
right?
here's one.
It's
here's
like
one
pushing
question.
your cafeteria tray along the little thing there, and you know you're hungry and you got to pick something, but nothing looks appealing.
Senator Ben Cardin, his seat is up in 2 years.
I don't know.
I believe so.
Because obviously he said, no, I'm not running for Senate, but this does keep his options open while he's still raising a lot of money around the state. And I think he's around a 78% popularity.
Right, and that's another thing too. That's why I'm kind of at 90%, maybe 80%, because he has a fallback. You know, he doesn't have to go governor to president, right? He can take a step and go into the Senate and, you know, do a term, half a term, or whatever the timing works out, and still gain the momentum to maybe run a little bit later.
Well, and let's say he took that route. This is what that would look like, right? Because the common wisdom in the talk is that Senator Ben Cardin is going to retire soon. So if he retires at the end of the term, obviously Congressman Trone puts $10 million in his campaign because he needs to win to even have a shot at that seat. So we could potentially, if he doesn't run for president, we could potentially see Trone v. Hogan for senator in 2 years.
Possible.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen, we have some other topics to cover. in a little bit of a different show tonight with our guests. But let's hold tight here and then come back and cover some of these other interesting topics from around the state. Welcome back to the show. Gentlemen, another topic in the Washington Post that obviously has statewide interest. The majority of Maryland voters are in favor of recreational pot or marijuana. That was a Washington Post and University of Maryland poll finds those results. Terrence, you were appointed earlier this year to the Medical Marijuana Commission, so this is something that you follow closely. What say you?
It's going to be on the ballot in November. The understanding is right now favorably, I think it's probably 70% chance that in favorable, 70% in favorable that it's going to pass and be legalized. In the event that it is legalized as recreational, because right now it's legal only medicinal, that all those laws will go into effect as of July of 2023. So there still has to be a window of so many things that have to be taken into account between the vote in November if it passes and then putting it into a recreational space in July of 2023. I think it's going to happen personally, outside of my role on the commission. I think we'll be the 18th state, 20th state at this time that would have it legalized recreational. But there's a lot that comes with that. I think that we really need to take in consideration some of the other things that come with recreational, the expungement of individuals who are serving time and who have records and what that's going to look like.
I think that's a good thing personally.
Absolutely. That was part of the bill that was actually rolled out with the passing of it as well. Of how do you care for that, and how do you implement that as well? There has to be a process for someone to have that removed off their record or somebody to be released from prison. Of course, it's only related to if that is the only charge as well. So if it's combined with other charges, then you don't get free.
So if you're a violent offender or whatever.
Right, yes. It was tied to that in addition to that charge.
Makes sense, frankly.
Absolutely. But I just want to be clear of that because,
Unless the other charge is a speeding ticket.
Right. So I just want to make sure that's clear and not the assumption that all of a sudden anyone is just going to be released from prison on these charges. And we unfortunately, disproportionately, a lot of those individuals are minorities across the state as well. Yeah. So I believe there's some benefit to this. Also, it helps in employment. Now, this would be removing a criminal offense of someone's record that may be inhibiting them from getting a job as well. So this opens up opportunities for a lot of people across the state, as well as their proven economic benefits of having recreational marijuana legalized in a state. And you're talking about the benefits to an economy. We also get to learn from some of the states prior of how they rolled it out, because there has been mistakes made by several states. So there's some great benefit there. So I believe, my personal opinion, that it will pass, and I believe that it won't be such a shakeup to the communities as people may assume.
One of the things I saw that medicinal marijuana revenues were about $388 million last year. So that gives you some of the impact in regards to financially. Jim, one of the things that I saw was 9 out of 10 voters under 40 years of age said yes. And then it started to decline, like 65 and over was kind of
52%.
Like 50-50.
Right. But if you look at it, I think the telling piece there is there was no demographic that was less than 50%.
Right.
Overall, Maryland, 73 out of 100.
Right.
Democrats, 78 out of 100. Republicans, 53 out of 100. Independents, 81 out of 100, which I thought was telling. Age 18 to 39, 87. 40 to 64, 73. 65 plus, 52%. So at least half of every demographic that they polled said, yes, this is okay. And I gotta think, and I think your points about expunging the records is an important piece. I also think that this is going to have a positive impact on maybe the drug trafficking into the country. And I know that they bring a whole lot more than marijuana in, but there's a lot of marijuana that comes across the border too.
Yep.
And if it's legal here, that kind of cuts off that need.
But I'll add this too. There's some economic things that we have to consider because this will not stop street sales completely. But now you have businesses that will be competing against.
But will the street sales kind of die off? Because how many? I would be willing to bet that when alcohol became legal again, people were saying, well, it's not going to stop the underground sales. And they're probably still underground sales. But do you think they're at the level they were in the 1920s during Prohibition? I would bet not.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely not.
So, yes, this is a generational change that's going to have to happen.
And also, I'll say this too, that this will allow you to also grow, I believe, 2 to 3 plants in your own personal home as well.
Right.
So that, for personal use. So if you don't want to go to a dispensary to make a purchase as well. It's a lot different than, it's dangerous to make alcohol, right? And you need a extreme environment in some cases, or know how to make alcohol that can possibly kill you if you don't make it correctly. Marijuana has is a different say drug that can be grown easily and can easily be undercut in pricing standpoint. So there's also a perception that a lot of people are getting into the marijuana business and are making booming money. They're making billions of dollars. It's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of science back behind it. There's a lot of compliance back behind it as well. Fees that are associated with it. Regulation is highly regulated, even in medicinal at this point. So the assumption it'll take some time for illegal marijuana that is being sold on the street to reduce to a level that we won't see it anymore.
Yeah.
Get out the calculator, because I'm telling you, 100% this is going to pass.
Oh, absolutely.
And the only question left in my mind is, will 420 eventually become a national holiday?
The next Democratic president, it probably will be, right?
Listen, it's probably recognized more than most holidays they are right now. I'm just saying.
It's one we can all
enjoy, right?
But you know what, gentlemen? There was a voting piece that I pulled out of this article, and it was something, Terrence, you've been preaching for a while, so I'll let you talk about this. There was a gentleman that was quoted in this article. His name was Aaron Watson. He was 32 years old. He said he doesn't often vote, but the prospect of buying marijuana legally in the state is helping motivate to get him to the polls. So to me, that speaks to, if you have voters under 40, 9 out of 10 are for this, we're going to have a very young demographic that's going to be at the polls, that's going to really shape how these races locally and some statewide.
That's an interesting point. And the other interesting thought process there is, if 78% of those are Democrats and 53% are Republicans, could that turn the tide a little bit on what is clearly aiming to be a bad year for Democrats?
Right. Well, I mean, but
and based on that, do you want to change your Trone Parrots?
No, I'm still good on Trone Parrott,
Okay.
because we are in Western Maryland. However, let's take it to the bluest district in our community, the city of Hagerstown. Does that change anything for you when we start talking about 2B?
I think the population that will come out aren't going to be leaning one way or another. There are a lot of Republicans that like marijuana, right? And there are a lot of Democrats that like marijuana.
Well, this post surely says there's a lot of people that like marijuana.
That's what I'm saying. So I don't think it's going to be favored more towards party, but I think there will be more voters that are going to be coming out. But
The issue voters.
the issue voters. But the problem is the issue isn't getting out there as much. Outside of us talking about this on the show, I just started getting emails and alerts that are telling people to come out and vote about it. But I've had conversation with a number of people who had no idea it was on the ballot.
Yeah.
We talk about candidates, but we don't put as much effort in the most democratic way that we get to really influence legislation directly is when these questions hit the ballot.
Yeah.
And there are other questions on the ballot right now, and I can guarantee you most of us don't know what the other questions on the ballot are either. Yeah.
There
So
was
if we
an
can
interesting quote from someone who was interviewed as part of this article, a gentleman from Fort Washington, Maryland. And his quote was that he did not intend to use in a new legal market, but he saw legalization as part of criminal justice reform.
Yes.
And as a result of that, plans to support the initiative in
Yeah.
November.
Yeah. So obviously there's wide support. So, here in the state of Maryland, it'll be interesting to see if this has an effect on just voter turnout altogether, where you have a higher percentage of turnout than you normally would in a midterm election. So that'll be interesting to see. Gentlemen, last topic for tonight. Recent polls are saying that Wes Moore is stretching out his lead over Dan Cox for the governorship. The Maryland University of Maryland and Washington Post poll says he's up by 32 points. Now, even if we just look at Western Maryland, can you find one Western Maryland politician that is standing strong for Cox right now?
Nope.
If I didn't see the signs, I wouldn't know he was still running. Like, honestly, he's been absent.
And that doesn't mean that, I believe he's still going to carry these Western states. Frederick, I don't think so. But, Washington County, Garrett County, Allegheny County, I believe he'll carry those. But the support is muted, right? We've heard from politicians saying, you know what, we're going to sit this one out.
But our voters going to do the same. That's my concern as well, right? Do you just go chalk and say, I have to vote for Cox because I'm a Republican?
Well, there are many that will.
Many that will.
Many will.
Or do you not cast a ballot? Or do you cast a ballot for Wes Moore? Like, I would love to know well, we'll see the numbers after as well when you see how many people truly voted and whether or not they cast a vote. But you don't have to vote, but you should be coming out to vote because there are other, seats that you really want to vote against. So do you just vote for someone you don't really want to see served just because they represent your party, but they don't represent your values?
Yeah. Now, Jim, there was something else that came out of this article that I kind of pulled out that just talks about what's on the concern of the voters. The number one concern of the voters in this poll was the economy. The number two concern for the voters was threats to democracy. And then number three, crime. So, I'm going to take you back to District 2B. Does that change how you feel about 2B, knowing what voters' concerns are? Because on two of these three issues, they line up very well for Republicans, right? Number one, the economy. Normally, voters trust the Republicans more on economy, and they trust them more in regards to crime. Threats to democracy, depends on how you view that. Because some people think that, our election process is a threat to democracy. Some people think that the events of January 6th are threats to democracy. So I don't know if that's a Democratic leaning topic or if it's more of a toss up. But what say you, Jim?
Yeah, I hate to say this, but I don't think most voters have that much forethought. Just my opinion. Terrence?
I don't disagree. I think that's getting in the weeds.
Do I think it could?
Do I think they should?
Yes.
Yes.
Could, should, coulda, shoulda, woulda.
If you don't go out and vote based on the economy and your safety, why are you voting?
Yeah.
That's the background of your livelihood.
Well, let me tell you why this grabbed me. My 29-year-old nephew was in town last week and we had dinner. Nice dinner, by the way, Terrence.
I didn't get invited.
Better than what you've ever taken me to. But we went out and had dinner. So to hear my 29-year-old nephew that I raised that I thought was going to be a career knucklehead tell me about inflation and how it was affecting his family, and when he's traveling, how his packed lunches are very meager because of the cost of everything, just caught my attention that, whoa, he's paying attention to this.
Well, we're in an environment now that you have to pay attention, right? You pick up your phone a couple of hundred times a day and you're hearing someone's opinion, and we beat certain words because what social media has done is also offered the why. Everybody knew when they had to tighten their belt. A lot of people didn't know why they had to tighten their belt.
Oh, it's very easy to see why.
Now you can
right?
see why. They're like inflation. That's new to a lot of people's vocabulary now. They knew the prices were going up, but they didn't know why prices were going up. And COVID has also afforded a better explanation of the impact of supply. When I hear somebody talk to me about supply chain, I'm like, okay, I think there's some great opportunity where social media has opened people's eyes and gave them a greater education on understanding the why. Now it's the people who are running for these seats to tell us the how they're going to fix it.
Yes.
And we know what the what is. Now we know the why. How are you going to fix it? That's what I'm waiting to hear.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have some new data points, right, in regards to what voters are thinking from a broad perspective around the state. Let's wrap up this segment with this. District 2B, the incumbent, Dr. Brenda Cham, versus Brooke Grossman. Where are you?
Toss up.
Mr. Moore?
I'll say this. Last time we spoke, I was right down the middle. It was 50-50. And part of that was Dr. Cham wasn't out and about as much as I thought she needed to be. I didn't think she was celebrating some of the wins that she had in legislation, even her short point of time being appointed. It just seemed a week later, a lot of that has changed. I see new door hangers out. I see her sign everywhere. I would also like to say that a lot of people don't even understand that the spelling of her name is Cham, and they don't even know she's the one that's actually running. Right. So I do give her some advice there to make sure she clarifies that with a lot of individuals because it's unique spelling, pronunciation of her name. But I'm probably 55-45, Delegate Cham.
Oh, that's a move for him.
It is.
That's a move for him. I'm still 50-50, right? Because there's data taking us in different directions. And I look back at some of the numbers. Dr. Cham was very close to Brooke Grossman in the city council race when Brenda was off the ballot basically she was out of the race because she had accepted the position to become the delegate. So, Brooke didn't have a great showing in that. So it's going to be interesting to see how things shape up. Will Biden's visit to Hagerstown give some momentum to the local Democrats?
Doubtful.
Or hurt.
Or hurt, yeah.
Yep.
So we'll see. I'm still at a toss-up. We're going to hold it there. Up next, our producer Jim Miller has a special conversation with author Art Callahan on his book, On America.
I'm joined today via Teams with Art Callahan. Art was a longtime resident of Washington County, first serving in the military at Fort Ritchie, then heading the Greater Hagerstown Committee, and after that, he founded this television show with me some 10 years ago. Art has served on numerous boards and commissions in the county, and in retirement, he and his wife, Ruth Ann, who was a former county commissioner in Washington County, moved to Texas. During COVID, Art decided to write an autobiography detailing his life and sharing some of his life lessons. Art, welcome to the show, and let's talk about your book, On America. What was your inspiration for this book?
Well, the question usually has been, Jim, why did you write the book? So let me take it from that perspective. There are three good reasons. The first reason is COVID. During the 20 and 21 period when we couldn't get out, I had some medical issues. I was sort of staying indoors, and I'd been looking to write a book since back in the time I was in Hagerstown. So I just decided to sit down and write the book, season 1, or question answer 1. The second answer is I wanted to give back to my community. And that community is threefold. We did a book signing here in Richmond, Texas, where my wife and I live today. We raised about $2,000 for homeless veterans based on giving away free books and soliciting donations. And so I'm coming to Hagerstown after I stop in my hometown of Hinton, West Virginia, where I'll do another book signing and hopefully raise a little money for the Hinton Railroad Museum. And then on to Hagerstown on the 14th of October from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Washington County Arts Council, 34 South Potomac Street. You know where it is very well because you're on the board. And that fundraiser will be the same thing. I'll be giving books away and soliciting from people to give a donation to the Arts Council as a means of giving back to their community. That's the sort of the bottom line of why I wrote the book, how the book came about. It's all about giving back to the community.
So I'm going to skip over the chapter titled Redheads, if only because I don't want the show to be canceled before its air. But you talk a lot in the book about childhood. Tell us about Art Callahan's youth.
Well, first off, let me say, as Ruth Ann, who has read the book, is wont to say, she's not the redhead in the book, just so you know, and won't feel bad about her. But my childhood, like I say, I played sports. I was a reasonable student. I got probably in as much trouble as the next person. My mother was a teacher, taught 40 years in West Virginia public schools. A little interesting story that's not in the book, but certainly is well worth saying here. It was interesting because of the way the public school education pension fund was established. My mother actually made more money in retirement than she ever made teaching, which was a rather interesting thing. It goes to show you how things have changed over the course of years. I recalled a couple of my very good friends from my youth. I knew some very good ball players that did great jobs and were very good at their skill in baseball and particularly in football. I also brought some of that forward and talked about my son's experience in high school at Smithsburg. He was not a dominating player by any stretch of the imagination, but he was surrounded by several really great athletes. And Coach Carol Reed, for example, who's an icon in the community in terms of football, had a great impact on my son's life and a great impact on me. The way he taught those kids and what he did for them was absolutely wonderful.
At one point in the book, you have a chapter titled The Meanest Man. Tell me, Art, what does one have to do to become the meanest man, and how did he influence you?
Well, the meanest man in Summers County, West Virginia, when I was growing up, was Uncle Bruce Allen. Uncle Bruce Allen would start the day by getting up and poking a full package of beech nut chewing tobacco into his left jaw. And when he would ever take that tobacco out, when he was finished with it, there was a little sack on his left-hand jaw where that tobacco had been. And during the course of the day, he always said he would do at least 3 packs of beech nut chewing tobacco, plus a little apple plug for those of you that are familiar with chewing tobacco and how that goes. And he was just an interesting character. He married who would have been my great aunt, Anna, and they had a fruit stand and a bar that was actually across the street from us where I grew up in Hilldale, West Virginia was the name of the area where I lived. And he was well noted for getting into bar fights. I think the incident I have in the book talks about these kicking fights where he'd square off with some of the quote unquote meanest men in the county and give them the opportunity to kick him in the stomach first, and then he would get his chance to kick him in the stomach. And usually after the first kick, the fight was over after they kicked Bruce and couldn't kick him down. And I think I related in the book that there was a fear in the eyes of the guy that was had challenged Bruce to one of these events. And I think the culminating issue there, and this brings through to my love of veterans. In the end, when Uncle Bruce died, nobody ever thought anybody'd go to his funeral. And I ended up there with my dad and my brother and 10 or 15 other people. And we were honestly surprised that anybody would show up at Uncle Bruce's funeral because he was literally the meanest man in the county. But at the end of the service, when they got ready to take the casket out, 6 guys about his age came forward and picked up the casket and took it out. And I asked Dad, who are those 6 guys? And Dad told me that they were 6 ex-Marines that had served with Uncle Bruce in World War I. And so the bond between veterans is a very, very big bond. And so I've never forgotten that. And that's why I thought that story was appropriate, that even the meanest man in the county can be loved for his passion and his service to his country.
Art, what struck me is that throughout the book there are many stories, happy, sad, intriguing, funny. Regardless of type, I read this as your glass always being half full. Is that a primary takeaway from this book for your readers?
Jim, I think that probably should be the credo for any needs to be half full. We're Americans. There's a little segment in the book where I talk about some of the racial problems that we have today, and I'm not particularly fond of anybody that claims to be who's born and raised or immigrated in here illegally ever saying they're anything but an American. That's what Americans do. We've, for whatever reason, we became the bright, shining city on the hill, if you want to wax a little biblical. And it's that city on the hill and that positive attitude and that glass being half full is the way Americans have generally been for all times. And so my purpose in sharing some of that story and other stories with a positive bent on it has a lot to do with, I think America needs today to reestablish herself as the great city, the shining light on the hill in terms of this world. And what we can do for our world today as we exercise the power that comes from that positive way of looking at things. And that's where I come from all the time, or at least I try to.
I love the term you just used, wax biblical. And throughout the book, you talk about your Christian beliefs and you talk about God's economy. Tell us about that.
Yeah, God's economy. I mean, that's, I think the scripture that I used in there, and that came from a wonderful, wonderful sermon from a very good friend of ours who was the priest out at St. James in down near Boonesboro, where we went to church for the longest period of time. And Ann Weatherholz was the priest, and she preached a sermon basically where she talked about God's economy. And yes, I'm an unabashed Christian. I have no problems with exercising any right that comes with being an unabashed Christian. And in God's economy, it's not socialism, it's not capitalism, it's not communism by any stretch of the imagination, but it deals with personal responsibility and personal actions that we need to take as human beings to fit into what I consider to be God's world, and therefore into God's economy. And I think that's important for all of us to be aware of. Is we need to always be looking to that higher power when it comes to actions we take, or to actions we've taken and take responsibility for.
No surprise you mention our two-party system in the United States, and you also talk about the fact that you try to listen and learn from people, whether you identify or agree with them politically or not. Did anyone on the opposite side of your thoughts ever change your mind?
Well, yeah, I mean, my mind's been changed numerous times, and I'll give you an example. As I say up front in the book, politically, I consider myself a conservative Republican. And for many, many years back during the Bill Clinton administration, I was pretty down on Bill Clinton, no doubt about it. I didn't think Bill Clinton was a particularly good president by any stretch of the imagination. But then, upon doing a little bit of research, yeah, my mind has changed a bit. A lot of people don't realize it, but the last balanced budget that this country has had since pre-World War II occurred during Bill Clinton's administration. And it came to pass because of Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich getting together and putting aside party lines and going about the case of having a balanced budget and bringing the United States back online, if you will, with balanced budgets. Now, granted, you could take that as good for the Republicans. You could take it as good for the Democrats. I like to think of it as good for Americans. And so, yeah, I've had my mind changed on several occasions. One of my better friends when I was working for Department of Defense, and I would like to think he thought of me as a friend, was representative from Western Maryland, U.S. Representative Goodloe Byron. And Goodloe Byron, as far as I'm concerned, was as close to me politically as anyone else I've ever known. In his views, at least the views he expressed to me, and listened to me express my views. And those of you who remember back then, Goodloe Byron was a Democrat.
King, on another theme in the book, patriotism, talk to me about your views there.
That's a creed that I've had for every day. We take out one, and let me frame this by saying one of the things that I have a great deal of problem with, and a Democrat tried to solve it, by the way, Daniel Inouye, who was, until he passed away, senator from Hawaii. Daniel Inouye put in law year after year after year to do Memorial Day actually on the 30th of May, which was the actual day that was first celebrated as Decoration Day and then ultimately referred to as Memorial Day. And I think that's a very important issue. But to compound that, I think we as Americans need to always remember every day of the world, those people that have sacrificed for this country, in many cases their lives, if not horrible wounds, that have been sacrificed for this country to retain its image and its nature in the world. And so, yeah, if I were to say anything to anybody, that everybody ought to pause at least 1 minute every day and be thankful as a memorial to those who sacrificed their lives and or their bodies or however you want to look at it, for the preservation of this great nation.
So finally, let's talk about your Hagerstown fundraiser at the Washington County Arts Council. Can you give us more information on that event?
Sure. Well, it's going to be on Friday, the 14th of October, from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. At the Washington County Arts Council, 34 South Potomac Street. We'll have some munchies there and a bunch of books to give away. And the only thing I'll be asking is, do you want me to sign the book, which I'll be glad to do? And would you like to make a small donation to the Washington County Arts Council for their efforts in this community? As I said at the beginning of this, that's part of paying back to this community, and that's something that is very important to me. The Hagerstown community for nearly 40 years was my home, and my livelihood was there, and I have great friends there. We miss them dearly, and I want to make sure that anything I can do to give back to that community, I do, and that other people join me in giving a little money back to the community for those efforts that, like the Washington County Arts Council is involved in. And I think that's very important to us. I'll sort of close with just a quick story, if you don't mind. The issue in schools and education has been for years and years and years. The first thing that usually gets cut in school budgets are the arts, and how precious those arts are to many people in our community, but many people in the nation and many people in the world, and how important it is to preserve artifacts and continue the efforts to keep going with arts information and arts education. So this, in some ways, is a contribution not only to the arts but to education, to educate people about the arts.
I'm confident there will be many that will want to get a copy of your book and support the Arts Council. So again, Art Callahan, Friday, the 14th of October, 5 to 7 p.m. at the Washington County Arts Council. That's at 34 South Potomac Street in Hagerstown. You can park in the parking deck, which, by the way, is just behind the Arts Council, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Art, thank you for being here. Thank you for what you've done for Washington County and all the communities that you've lived in, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Well, that's all the time that we have for tonight. We hope that you'll like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and send us your comments to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That is feedback@theflipsidetv.com. But most importantly, join us again next week for another episode of The Flip Side.